TheDraftSociety.com presents a Premier League Draft Fantasy Podcast. Welcome to the Key Pass Collective, your exclusive source for the information, analysis, and advice you need to dominate your fantasy leagues. Come on in. We've been expecting you.
What is going on, draft heads? Welcome back to the Key Pass Collective. I'm Joe Williams. I'll be your host here for this special podcast series that we're going to be doing on the various different positional breakdowns for your draft fantasy game. First, let's remind you the Key Pass Collective is the audio companion to the DraftSociety.com. We are a draft fantasy football podcast and site. And basically, we've got everything you need in order to dominate, absolutely dominate your leagues during the season, whether it is weekly player projections, whether it is a fixture difficulty tracker, whether it is trade advice, articles on sleepers, waiver wire pickups to get you fully ready to win that matchup, win that game week. We've got that. But preseason, right now, we are focusing on draft prep. We are focusing on getting you ready to have the absolute best draft that you possibly can. So what does this mean? We are making rankings, team previews, cheat sheets, predicted 11s, very, very in-depth analysis articles, talking through the various strategic elements of this draft game. Fixture difficulty tracker for the early series of in-season fixtures, so you can kind of prep yourself depending on if you want to maybe attack the season to really get a good start and then maybe trade off some players. There's a lot of strategy that goes into these things. Anyway, we've got it all there for you. Plus player projections. Articles are dropping daily on our draft kit. It is the largest draft kit that this game, the Draft Premier League game, has ever seen. So if you'd like full access to that, $15. $60 will get you full access to the draft kit and the Inner Circle membership for the entire season. So all of our exclusive, everything that we make, whether it is like the aforementioned trade advice, ghost point tracker, set piece taker trackers, all of it, you get all of that for the entire season. If you don't want to do that, there are some free things on there as well. Check out the draft kit. We've got some top 75 rankings and positional rankings completely for free, as well as a few articles on there that are free as well. Plus, we're free. Anytime you want on Twitter, hit us up, send us a little message, add us on Twitter, start a conversation on there. We're happy to jump in there and give you some advice on drafts or whatever it is. Happy to get on there and just chat this game that we all know and love. Okay. Let's talk about this pod series. So this is going to be a series of 3 episodes. And what we're going to be doing is breaking down, not all of, but many of the 22-23 season draft assets by position. So for each episode in this series, we want to make sure that you've got a handle on the elite assets of that sort of positional breakdown. We want to make sure that you're understanding how to kind of properly rank those really tricky sort of mid-draft assets. You know, whether it's the 4th round, the 6th round, the 8th round, those can be really tricky to try to figure out what the exact value of those players is. So our goal is to kind of help talk you through some of those assets, those mid-round guys that can be, like I said, kind of tricky to really put a value on. So we'll talk through some of those. And then finally, once we get to the late rounds in the draft, it's a lot of times it's a dart throw. So we're going to give you our favorite dart throws, if you will, and then make a case for why maybe they're not just a dart throw, why there's some sneaky value late in the draft with some of these sleepers or potentially hidden gems that we'll hope to point out to you. Finally, before we sign off, we're going to end with some players that we think maybe are being overvalued or overrated or overhyped, if you will. Bottom line is we think the ADP or the average draft position is too high for that particular player, and then we'll go ahead and sign off. We're going to try to keep these ones relatively short, and yeah, the format is going to be the same for all three. So whether it's defenders, midfielders, or forwards, you're going to hear a lot of the same things when the podcast begins, and then we'll attack it the same way. But obviously, the content therein should be valuable, should be gold. So yeah, we'll do top tier, we'll do mid tier, and then we'll do late round drafts. A reminder as you are listening, if you can, to pull up our rankings on thedraftsociety.com so you can follow along and see where we've got different guys ranked. We can try to explain it as much as we can, but it's helpful to have a visual on that. So if you do want to head over to the website, check it out. Aesthetically, we think it's pleasing, but regardless, there's some really good information on there. So pull up our rankings if you can and follow along because we'll be trying to hit these pretty quick. So we just want to make sure that people do have the ability to sort of know where we're at, what we're talking about, and follow along as we go through these. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. This is your forwards preview. All right. I am joined by Toddy and Gavin from the Draft Society. Head over and check out all the amazing things that they've written. But tonight, you're going to actually hear their voices. And we're going to run you through these forwards. Let's not even dilly-dally here. Let's jump right into it, lads. Okay, we've got premium assets. As far as forwards go, that's going to take you from about number 1 to arguably, and we could potentially argue this or not, number 26, and these are our old rankings, mind you. We did update them a couple of days ago, but I did take these from the original rankings that we released on the 14th of July. So these are going to take you. I'll read the premiums because they're quick and easy. Mohamed Salah, Son, Harry Kane, Diaz, Haaland, Nunez, Sterling, Jesus, Mahrez, Jota coming in at 26, and Jota, with the news of the injury, did fall a bit further in our recent update. So just some things to mention there. As far as those premium assets, which ones do you want to key in on? Todd, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, absolutely. I the first thing I wanted to mention, or just pose as an open-ended question: what qualifies a player, in this case, 2 players, to be used in full name version as opposed to only last names? So Mo Salah and Harry Kane got the extended use of their names.
Yep.
Everyone else was just last names.
It's one of those things. Just some names are better when you say them both. As a kid, people always called me Joe Williams. Like nobody just ever called me Joe. It was always Joe Williams. Like, is Joe Williams coming? It would be the full name every single time.
Nice.
So
you are the Harry Kane.
I must be
of your high school.
Exactly.
Okay, so jokes aside, I wanted to highlight 2 players on this list. 3 now with Jota being halfway in, halfway out.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start with Darwin Nunez, who is currently in our updated consensus ranks ranked at 21, as opposed to the one that you read out where we had him 15.
Mm-hmm.
So you, Joe, have him at 13.
Mm-hmm.
All the rest of us have him more around 20 or a bit later as well. So obviously we know we have read all the info. We have done all the research. We know he's a great player. He's 22. Klopp loves him. We know all the marketing stuff, but this we expected Klopp to have Luis Diaz bed in slowly, because that's what we all 3 of us Liverpool fans have grown to understand about how Klopp works with players, and we've seen evidence of this. And Luis Diaz came and done the exact opposite of what we expected him to do. The question is this the new Klopp, and we should expect a similar baptism of fire for Darwin Núñez, or was that a situation where he put in Diaz because he had no other options, or because Diaz impressed him so much that he was willing to forego his usual method? This is again an open-ended question, and I would actually love your guys' take on it, because Gavin and I both have him at 20, and you have him at 13, so we are a bit more concerned about this. I think this is the main reason why you would have him lower.
Yeah, that's definitely why I brought him in a little bit later in my updated ranks. Obviously there are a lot of things in kind of the preseason performances, and you start to see kind of the negative comments, and you have to put those aside. But I think for me, when looking at Núñez, just starting to think about, past performance with Klopp and betting in players, Diaz, like you said, is definitely kind of the outlier there. And I think possibly he could be moved back up a little bit in my rankings before kind of our last consensus ranks before draft day, now with Jota's injury. But I still think probably in that 18 to 20 range feels about right. I do expect him to be rotated a little bit more, bedded in potentially a little bit slower, and brought along. I think, that's kind of where I'm at. I think he's definitely going to step into the role more over the course of the season, but a little bit more hesitant to take him early round 2, just based on kind of that past performance and managerial style from Klopp.
Yeah, I think the reason he's a bit higher, and I was drafting yesterday night, and he went, I think, at 11.
Yeah, it's ADP 13.3.
Yeah, so he's close to being a first rounder on ADP and in actual drafts. And I think the main reason is most of us, the sort of old guard, even we remember the first season Salah came in, and I think he was a consensus. There was no consensus ranks back then, but he was a consensus second rounder, and he just blew everybody out of the water.
Yeah.
And I think there is a bit of FOMO that makes, and this is similar with Gabi Jesus as well. So these new players in new situations with potentially established starters around them. Obviously, Jesus we expect to start straight away, but these players, people just don't wanna lose out on them. So I think that's definitely the case with Darwin Núñez, but I see a lot more difficult early season because it's the Portuguese league to the Premier League is a huge step up, and I think there will be teething issues.
So I'll take 20 seconds on this. Real quick, I will just say that I ranked him that way, and then like a day and a half later, he scored 4 goals. But then also, part of my thinking is the fact that Klopp has not done that betting in as much for players that the club is now paying a lot more money for. Like the betting in process seemed to be sort of one of maybe his older style or his previous style, when you're getting guys who were kind of like prospects, and hopefully they were going to come good. I mean, Chelsea had already given up on Salah at that point. He was still a question mark. The guys we're bringing in now, they're not question marks anymore. VVD, Diaz, and of course Nunez. They're not question marks. I mean, these are proven guys who are superstars in the making. So that's part of it. Then the other part is this. For me, when you get into that second round, most of the midfielders there for me feel fairly similar. I mean, there's some upside to certain guys over others, but for the most part, I'm pretty happy if I get any of those midfielders kind of in that, like, I don't know, 12 to like 22 range. I'm pretty happy with almost any of those guys on my team. And so if you're offering me the chance to take like what could potentially be an absolutely elite forward before a midfielder that I might be able to get anyway, I'm going to take you up on that. So that's where I came from on it. More of a draft aspect, if you will.
Yeah, I can see that happening. Just wanted to add to just finish up the Darwin Núñez talk. Just wanted to add Draft Lads season projections. He has him at 13.2 points per start, which puts him in the top 10-ish, top 15 for older players, 4 points per start. But he has him projected to start 22 games. And that is where you lose out sort of with his valuation, is that if you don't see him starting more than 22, 25, then I don't think he's worth a first round pick.
Okay. Well, I have him at 13, so.
Yeah, that's not a first round pick then. Fair enough. Okay, and my other player I wanted to mention is Riyad Mahrez. We are pretty similar in valuation for him. He is at consensus rank 24, and everyone is ranking him between 20 and 29. I have him, and Joe, both of us, we have him lowest. Gavin, you have him at 24. I think just to highlight Mahrez and the general upside of Man City boys, he has always been a below 22 games starter, and he is firmly in the conversation to be a top 20 player, not just for WAR, but for overall points as well. And that is crazy. He only started 15 games last season, and I think that is the outlier. So if someone is giving you Riyad Mahrez looks in round 3, then snap their hands off and get Riyad Mahrez in.
So you're saying he's a value at his ADP of 29.9?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I like that. Even I, once bitten, twice shy, would probably take him in the third round if he were to fall to me there. I can't see not doing it.
Yep.
Nice. Okay. Gavin, any thoughts on any of these premium forward assets?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep this up the whole way, the same that you are with your reference to Harry Kane, but he's one that I want to highlight. Yeah, I can't do it. So I'm going to just,
you just call Kane.
Drop the first name.
Yeah,
go
it's
with
fine.
Kane. I have looked at our consensus ranks, and Kane has kind of consistently been in that 5th spot in terms of how we're approaching things. I think there's some variation in our rankings between Kane and Trent, between 4 and 5. But the more I'm looking at it and thinking about it and kind of reflecting on last season, the more I'm thinking Kane actually should be in that same conversation as Son and KDB and Salah.
Oh wow.
So I went back and looked at the numbers, and if you remember, I'm sure you do, there was a lot of speculation that Kane was going to be moving to Manchester City last season, and kind of
I must have missed all that.
Yeah, kind of got wrapped up in all
Yeah.
of the media hype and his brother's management of the conversation, all of that, and
Oh,
it
God,
really, really, I think, got to him, and he had his head turned, and he had a very poor start to the season by his standards. I looked, and over the first half of the season, he was level on points with Raul Jimenez.
Wow.
Which is pretty wild to think about. And then the second half of the season, so sorry, the first half of the season, he was forward number 17, about 240 fantasy points behind Salah at the first half of the season. Second half of the season, Kane was forward 1. He was up there with Son. Both of them were far and away better than any other forwards. And he made up, I think, almost 200 of those points on Salah by the end of the season. He only finished about 70 points behind. So heading into this season, I think you see the impact that Conte had. Spurs have strengthened. They have more depth now. I don't think they're title contenders, but I do think they have a lot more tools available to kind of push on multiple fronts. And I do think they will improve in terms of how they're playing in the Premier League this season, especially with having Richarlison to be able to kind of rotate and rest.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've seen with Kane is that he's always been started in pretty much every competition for Spurs, regardless, just because they don't have another option.
Yeah.
And I think now that they have some more attacking depth, it gives Conte the opportunity to pick and choose where Kane is going to be most effective. And I do think the Premier League is going to be the focus. So I see Kane actually maybe having a couple less starts this season, but I think the impact of that second half of the season is something that he can potentially sustain a lot longer. There are some concerns about the World Cup and Kane's injury history. And I think if anything is going to come about in terms of an injury, it is going to be because Southgate runs him into the ground at the World Cup.
Yeah.
But I don't hold too much stock in that. I think we've seen Kane kind of get through a whole season at full fitness and looks to really be kicking on in preseason as well with his performances so far. So I'm actually considering moving him up in my rankings to maybe 2 or 3, which seems a little crazy, but I think that's where I'm at on Kane right now.
Wow. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and then the other player I wanted to highlight from this premium group is Raheem Sterling. So kind of similar to what Toddy was mentioning with Nunez and Mahrez. Sterling had, a lot fewer starts last season at City. And I think if you look back through his numbers and kind of compare to this most recent season, he's typically started 28 to 30 games in a season. And now, and sorry for my dogs in the background.
All good. It happens.
So I think with Sterling, he's going to be the focal point at Chelsea. Tuchel seems pretty adamant that he doesn't really have much in the way of other forwards to kind of challenge and build around. So I think everything is going to be built around Sterling being kind of the focal point of the attack. They may look to bring in one additional attacking signing this window, but I think right now defense is still their priority. And who knows how long it'll take to figure out whether Koundé is arriving or not. Still ongoing at this point.
Rich James is thinking not soon enough, but
exactly. But yeah, I think there's this possibility that Sterling jumps back up from 23 starts to 30 plus this season in Chelsea's team. And I do think there will be some fall off probably in his points per start, just because he's going to a team that isn't scoring quite as many goals as Manchester City. But again, I think with him being the focal point and having the opportunity to have so many more starts, I think he enters the conversation of a round one pick. It's really close for me. I'm thinking about I'm pick 11 in one of my leagues, and it's kind of that thing that you mentioned, Joe, of do I reach a little bit here and think about what's going to come back to me the next round, or does it make more sense to start with somebody like Robertson, or maybe Saka falls to 11? I'm not sure, but that's kind of one of those conversations that's kind of creeping in. Is like, is Sterling worthwhile as a round one, kind of end of round one pick, or does it make more sense to wait a little bit longer? So that's kind of where I'm at with both of those. I think both are potentially going to outperform their ADP.
Okay, I like it. We'll have more conversations around draft picks and who to take where later, but that'll stray us away from this particular position that we're focusing on. So we'll leave those for another day. But I do think that's interesting that you bring up the fact that taking Sterling in that first round would still leave you with a lot of those, really good midfielders, that kind of crop that I was talking about /
Right.
Robertson for that second round. That's something to think about for sure. Okay. Any other discussions quickly on premium assets, quote unquote premium assets?
Well, the only one I wanted to mention, and it's on the precipice of being a premium or for the next group, but I'll still mention is Jota, who currently has a hamstring injury.
Yeah.
And has fallen to round 4 in my draft that I did last night, and I actually took him in round 4 because I still have him as, like, I know these preseason injuries are a real sort of red flag, so to say, but he currently has a hamstring injury, and there are still more than 2 weeks, or at least when we got the info that he had a hamstring injury, there were still almost 3 weeks to go until the start of the season. People or players that we have covered or watched recover from possibly similar hamstring injuries to start the next game after they go off the field. So I'd still say that even if Jota misses the first few weeks of the season, he's still amazing value at round 4.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I told you that yesterday when I saw that draft board. That's highway robbery for me. You took him 3 picks before somebody took Ronaldo. Like, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Okay. Well, let's talk mid tiers then, because Jota's probably in that conversation now, but we'll leave him in the aforementioned group just because we're all Liverpool fans anyway, so it's fine. So mid tier players. We're looking at consensus rank, and this was the previous batch. We can get you the new ones here in just a second, but it goes from Ivan Toney essentially down to what I would consider somewhere around the Sinistera sort of time in the draft, which is 73-ish, right in the 70s, right in there. And that does include, players like your Rashfords, Richarlisons, Kai Havertz, Zaha, Antonio. It's that whole kind of crop of players that we all kind of have trouble really putting a value on. And when it comes down to it in that 5th, 6th round, who are you taking over someone else? So these get a little bit tricky, a little bit hairy, as I previously mentioned. And this is where I think people need a little bit of guidance just in terms of maybe guys we're high on or ones to avoid. So Gavin, why don't we start with you on this one? What are your who are your players you want to key in on for the mid tiers?
Sure. I think kind of the opposite of what I did with premium assets. I've got 2 guys that I want to point out as maybe more cautionary or being a little bit more cautious with your approach for them, just based on their ADP. And I think even where we have them in our consensus ranks, the first of which is Mikel Antonio. I think he's been a very explosive asset, and I think you can look at kind of how he started last season and justify that. But I think a lot of kind of where he is falling in drafts and being taken, and I've seen him go in kind of like the mid to late third round and early fourth. But he put up, I think, 40% of his points in the first 10 game weeks last season.
Wow.
He started like a house on fire. I think it was 3 consecutive matches of like 28 plus. And he was, the first overall forward into, I think, the beginning of October. And it's easy to forget that based on kind of where he finished up. And you look at the kind of overall rankings and you think, yeah, it makes sense that he's there with kind of the average scores that he has. But I think a lot of Antonio's value is kind of skewed by that early season form. And I also think there are some risks with West Ham in general this season that may not work out quite so well for him. There's a lot of question marks. I think he could still be a very good asset and surprise a lot of people and potentially be worthwhile in the third round. I'm just not quite so high on him. Mostly, I think the kind of concerns with West Ham being in Europe next season. There's this speculation of them moving to a new formation and trying out a 3-5-2 with Scamacca arriving and then potentially them bringing in Philip Kostic as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we've seen Antonio play in a 2-striker system. He's typically either been kind of up top on his own or on the left wing. So it might be something that he needs to adjust to. And then
Antonio, sorry, real quick. Antonio, ADP of 43.4 right now. So maybe the community is a little bit savvier than we're giving them credit for here. 43.4 is not bad. Well, that's the 4th round, isn't it?
Yeah. That maybe they've kind of cued into this as well. I think I still even have him a little bit lower than that. I think I'm closer to the end of the 4th round in my rankings.
Yeah, because Kai and Ali are both below him, and I think I might take them both before him if it were me.
Yeah, I definitely take Watkins before him. Kai and Antonio are very close for me.
Okay.
Especially with Tuchel's recent comments about not being happy with his attackers.
Well, how could you?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he basically said, like, how do you expect me to make changes if I've got the same players? So not super high on Havertz this season. But yeah, and then I think the other thing that has been a concern in the past, and I'm worried about a little bit again, is the fitness issues. I'm wondering if Antonio staying fit for a whole season when it was an anomaly. Hard to say, but you always have to kind of factor in those previous injuries, and I think last season was the most starts he had gotten in a Premier League season ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to agree with you there.
So yeah,
about the anomaly.
I think end of round 4 I think is probably value. Could obviously outperform that, but that's kind of generally where I'm thinking for Antonio. And then the other player I wanted to highlight was Callum Wilson, and I think he is one of the trickiest forwards for me to rank.
Yeah,
I think there's so much that says Newcastle is going to improve, and they have improved. And you look at kind of the end of last season when he returned from his long-term injury and he looked great. He was, all over the place. He scored a couple goals at the end of the season. But he missed a lot of time with that Achilles injury. And he's been a pretty injury-prone player throughout his career. I don't know if that comes back to haunt Newcastle, especially if they don't strengthen it forward, with Chris Wood kind of being the only backup option that they have as a forward now. But that also kind of reinforces their need to strengthen in the transfer market. And there have been some rumors of Newcastle now jumping into the race for Broya, and a couple of other strikers that I've seen kind of over the course of the summer that kind of suggests that maybe Wilson isn't being trusted to be the long-term option there at Newcastle. So I think if we're looking at somebody in round 5, that's a tricky proposition where, maybe Newcastle don't bring in somebody this window, but they do kind of go for that marquee signing in January, maybe. It's kind of reminds me a little bit of Adama last season, where I'm excited about him, but I also am a little worried about his injury record, and then also the potential that he is replaced in the lineup.
That's such a tough spot in the draft. Like with Wilson there, you're finding him around guys like Mitrovic, and I mean, if you're still in need of a forward at that point, you're looking at Mitrovic, you're looking at Jimenez, you're looking at maybe Richarlison if he falls to you there, or I mean,
so many question marks.
Brennan Johnson, this is a really interesting. It's a tricky spot in the draft, and and you don't want. I mean, you're still in the sub 10 picks, so you don't want to waste that pick. Certainly, that's a hard one for sure.
Yep, I think I agree with Gavin here, and he went in the aforementioned draft. He went round 6, which is more to his sort of speed, I think. When I look at players like Wilson, who I would look at as a short-term high upside pick, I always try to go to the trusted fixture difficulty tracker. So I'm assuming no one. I've seen drafts going as early as mid-July, but assuming everyone is trying to draft as late as possible,
right? Ideally, right,
as close to the start of the season as possible. So you will know if he's actually injured there, and this is similarly true for Antonio as well. And if he's not injured, then for me, the main metric to look at with these guys is the first few fixtures, because if you can optimize to pick a questionable guy who you think will start, but you want to maximize value on him, you pick the guy who is starting out hot. Well, for forwards, the fixtures against in the first 6 games, Newcastle are the second worst. They have Man City, Liverpool, and surprisingly, Crystal Palace are the third most difficult team to face for forwards. So they have the first, the second, and the third most difficult team to face for forwards.
Vieira, baby. And I think Wolves will be better defensively, at least. I do personally.
Well, let's go back to the defenders pod, or maybe the deep cut unrecorded goalkeepers pod on that one, whether Wolves will be better defensively, but obviously Forest on game week 1, a newly promoted side, is always a gamble, and Brighton as well, surprisingly among the top 5 for most difficult places or most difficult teams for forwards to face.
Yeah.
West Ham, incidentally, 4th worst on the same list, facing Chelsea, City, Brighton, Spurs in the first 6 games.
Oh, and that's in reference to the Antonio discussion.
Yeah. So I'm fully on board with Gavin's asterisks behind
Nice.
these players.
Okay, I like it. I always love when we can come back to something that is like tangible, that coincidentally is found on our site. Gavin, anything else to add on either of those guys?
No, just glad that the stats back up my musings.
Nice. Love it.
It's
All right,
always
Toddy,
good.
let's hear your mid-round guys, Toddy.
Mine are also both guys that I'm highlighting because I'm lower on than where we actually have them.
Okay.
One is Richarlison, who I'm lowest on, and I think it doesn't need much explanation. Just copy and paste what Gavin said about Harry Kane, because although Richarlison could end up in a sort of timeshare with Kulusevski, but I do see Kulusevski as a much better player than Richarlison. So I think there's a set front three at Spurs, and Richarlison is there to help with rotation and to help with potential injuries. But as we're not explicitly planning for or looking at injuries, and neither Son nor Kane nor Kulusevski are particularly injury prone, I find it difficult to even recommend drafting him. Not that I wouldn't draft him at a certain point, but to find a narrative where I could say go on and go in for him. Again, I have to go back to my pet project, or my pet two of my favorite stats. Overthinking football's quality starts. And drafted thoughts is fixture difficulty tracker. So for a guy like this, a guy who's not nailed on, you can throw these essentially out of the window, and you cannot use them because like, even if Spurs were among the top teams to face, or to have a good fixture list at the beginning of the season, he could end up not playing at all in the first 6 games, and you essentially would feel, at the end of the first 6 games, you would essentially feel like you've dropped a 5th or 6th round pick,
right?
Which is still a very valuable pick. So do not draft players in the first 6 rounds who have no clear path to starting games.
Let me give you 3 numbers quick before we continue. So ADP of 56 currently. That's most currently from Fantrax right now.
56.
56. We have him, of course, at 64. And then I'm looking at DraftLad's projections, and he's projected 71st on the season. But like you said, of course, his projected games started only 17.
Like, those 17 could all come in the second half of the season.
Is he somebody you might consider playing off the bench? I know we don't say that very often.
I think for that to happen, you'd need to get a feel for how Conte uses the 5 subs.
Yeah.
Before that, like on draft day, I cannot have that be a decisive factor in his case.
Especially at ADP 56.
Yeah, it's way too high. I've got I think our do not draft list is coming out in the next day or so, and Richarlison is my pick for do not draft.
Nice.
I cannot believe he is ADP 56. I don't see it. And if you're interested in my rationale, just go to the article, because I've spent a decent chunk of time writing that out. But it's basically exactly what Toddy is saying. The playtime concerns and just a round 5 pick is not what I want to use on a rotation piece.
He's ahead of a player you may remember going in the second round last season, Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Richarlison's going before DCL.
Like, looking at my own rankings, the most damning is that I have, these are the players I have before him: Patrick Bamford, Raul Jimenez,
Okay, yeah.
and Che Adams.
Wow, Che Adams is currently with an ADP of 113.4.
I have all of those players above Richarlison as well.
Yep.
And I actually think I'm lowest on him now by 1 in our updated consensus rankings. I'm right there with you, Toddy.
Wow.
Yep. You have or not mistakenly, but by chance invited the anti-Richarlison club to analyze on the podcast. So,
oh man,
you'll get angry Spurs fan letters.
I'm third highest on him. I mean, I guess I'm third highest on him at almost 60. Genie has him at 47, so I'd be curious to hear his rationale there. But it might be something along the lines of how I feel about Jota, where he's almost going to be spelling anyone in that front three. And so that could actually spell kind of more starts for him than maybe we're giving him credit for, because people need to rest. So it's if he's in for Kulusevski 1 week, he might be in for Kane the next week, and we know he can play along the top pretty much anywhere because he had to because of injuries previously. So I'm with you guys. I'm probably not going to end up with him on any teams, but I do see maybe an argument that he'll get more starts than 17.
I agree with that, but if you look at past seasons, I think his lowest number of starts has been like 31.
Wow.
So it's a big drop off in my opinion in terms of how many games he's going to get.
Yeah, and when you think about his actual output, I mean, I know it was a worse team, but still, it's like even with 31, he never really cracked that kind of top tier of forward talent,
But would you be surprised if he just started all the cup games, and if Spurs win the first 3 Champions League games, or even if they win the first 2, then all of the rest of the Champions League games?
Not at all.
And that would be like a week or a game a week for him.
Yeah, not at all.
So.
And I think he'll play every week. And here's the problem, Toddy. If you look at the Do Not Draft list or the Do Not Draft article that's coming out, I also have chosen a Spurs player on there. It's a different one, but I mentioned, and I looked it up on, I think some Twitter source or something, but I verified it just to make sure. But Conte utilized 5 subs, something like almost 80% of the time when he was allowed them in that kind of Project Restart season in Italy. So he was among the highest of any coach during that Project Restart sort of, whatever session you want to call it, to use all 5 subs of almost any coach in the world in the top 5 leagues.
I'm not surprised by that. I seem to remember him using the halftime sub even when there were only 3 subs available.
Oh, and imagine if he brings on halftime subs, how upset. I mean, managers are going to be livid.
I think we'll see more halftime subs this season than ever before.
Yeah,
but yeah, you don't want your first 5 round picks halftime subbed.
I'm having flashbacks to Harrison.
Oh, yeah, Lord.
Exactly.
Okay, put a bow on the Brazilian.
Yep, and probably Spurs before we get shut down. And my other pick is Marcus Rashford, and he he's creeping up draft boards. I will give you that, but I would still exercise caution. I think currently our main source for United speculation in our draft society group chats is Genie.
Yes.
And he is adamant that Bruno, Ericsson, Sancho, Ronaldo, and Rashford will all be in the starting 11 most of the time, and I just cannot for the life of me see it happening. Starting with 5 attacking players, most of who are explicitly known for not doing enough defending. So I'm concerned how that attack will work, like at all, and whether Rashford can gain back his form from 3 seasons ago. Was it? Yeah, 2 seasons ago that made him second round pick.
Yeah, he's made his way up to 61 currently. Let's see. Where did he go in your draft that you just had? He was in the 4th. So considerably higher than 61.
Yeah. He was like Martial, Ronaldo, and Rashford were gone by the 5th round, which is just.
See, I was actually gonna bring up Martial once we finish talking about Rashford, because I saw that on your draft board that you shared with me again, and he went in the beginning of the 5th.
Yes.
The beginning of the 5th, before aforementioned Mikel Antonio, before just any, like, before Joel Matip, before Trossard, before just guys that are going to start like literally every single week.
Yep. Rashford went before Diogo Jota.
Yeah, that you must have been overjoyed to see. I'm sure you, at that point in the draft, you thought for sure Jota was going.
Yes, and I was and I wasn't looking at Rashford to pick if Jota had gone. And I get it. This is a time when there will be vastly different narratives for looking at United assets. Some, like me, will be hesitant to buy in to the revolution of Ten Hag and buy in to just everything miraculously working. Some will say that finally the right managers there to get these otherwise, I agree with, very talented players to play well and to function well. I can see that happening, but I still think that club at this time and for the last few years has been broken, and changing managers is just not gonna make it work. Yeah. I mean, you can see, and I don't want to go down changing up our anti-Spurs agenda into an anti-United agenda, but you can see from the signings they have made, like they've signed a left back to a position that they had 2 pretty decent left backs in.
Mm-hmm.
They have signed an attacking midfielder where they arguably have the only player they have on their roster who can be considered world class. And they have, and the players that they are linked with, none of them are defensive midfielders who, like everyone, Man United fans including, have been crying out for.
Yeah.
So does that not suggest that there is something inherent, or not inherently, but something in the big picture stuff that is broken, and it will probably not be changed by changing managers?
Okay. I mean, I'm a little bit higher on him, I think, than that. Like, and just we can kind of put a bow on him as well. But at 61, we're in that aforementioned kind of weird zone where forwards start to get a little bit tricky and the valuation becomes very varied. And so when you look at Rashford versus the next forward in ADP is Callum Wilson, the aforementioned. So Gavin, who would you prefer?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm glad you asked that because I thought about it earlier, and I was actually going through and kind of updating my own rankings, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to take I'm going to move Rashford up above Callum Wilson.
Yeah. So I like at 61, it's not bad, right? The problem is, Toddy, that he went in the 4th round yesterday in your draft.
Yeah, and I think he will creep up in ADP as well.
Yeah.
As we go closer to the season.
Okay. I'm glad we touched on Martial too, because I was going to ask you guys about him. Gavin, we sort of blabbered on for a while over those guys. Is there anything you wanted to add on any of those United assets?
I'm maybe a little bit hotter on them than Toddy, but
on Martial,
not. No, and maybe we can touch on that a little bit later.
Oh, okay, got it. Sorry,
but yeah,
I haven't looked forward to the document.
All good. But no, I think Sancho and Rashford, I'm feeling pretty good about.
Okay, I like it. I'm liking Sancho too, low key. Don't tell anyone in my draft that starts at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Okay, let's talk late rounders, sleepers, or hidden gems. So these are guys from anywhere from Che Adams all the way down to Kelechi Iheanacho, or let's look at our most updated set of rankings. These would be guys from, again, Che Adams at 77, all the way down to Jaden Anthony at 132. In this group is going to be Julian Alvarez, quandaries like Adama Traore, Brennan Johnson, guys like Danny Welbeck. So there's a lot here. There's a lot to think about. And there are definitely some weird, really confounding names here that managers are going to be sifting through on draft day. And sometimes, having a minute and a half to try to make their decision. So let's talk these late round assets. Toddy, which ones did you want to bring up either in a positive or a negative light?
So I want to bring up 3 guys very quickly, both for positive and negative reasons. I'll let you, Joe, jump into the analyst chair and take your favorite, Denise.
Yes.
I'm not going to talk about him. The 3 guys I wanted to talk about very briefly is Dom Solanke, Julian Alvarez, and Kelechi Iheanacho. Dom Solanke, I think Gavin was lucky enough to proofread my Bournemouth article. Man, if you've just purchased a draft kit or an ultimate pass, do not start with the Bournemouth articles.
It's rough reading.
It's very rough reading, and it's not because of the Hunglish. It's because Bournemouth are a combination of very, very difficult fixtures, very, very minimal new signings, and not being very good in the first place. And this trifecta is just horrid. I think I am currently ranking Solanke just because I had less time to finish up the end of the ranks, but I will explicitly pay attention to not having him in my top 150 by the time Thursday comes around. I just cannot, in good faith, recommend drafting him at all. There will be, I will tell you, there will be times when he will be worth considering for sleepers or waivers, but to draft, no way.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're starting Villa, City, Arsenal, Liverpool. That's their first four.
Yeah.
Like, even if he scored against Villa, you would still drop him for the next 3 games. Okay, so the other two both fit the bill of high upside punts for me, and I will tell you why. Julian Alvarez, he is, although I ranked him obviously a bit higher, but he is one of those classic 14th, 15th, 16th round pick for me, who you pick up and just hope somehow gets close to the first team, because I think his upside will be huge. I think he, doing a bit of research, he is much more of a player capable of playing a similar shadow striker, false 90 role that Pep thinks he invented in the last 2 years. So I then obviously Erling Haaland. So if for some reason Pep wants to change systems during a game, or wants to start out in a different system, then he will be a good player to plug in. He was very prolific in Argentina, which is probably needs an asterisk and brackets as well, but it's worth noting.
Yeah.
And going back to the fixture difficulty tracker, they're starting West Ham, Bournemouth, Newcastle, Crystal Palace, Nottingham Forest. That's their first 5.
And don't forget, there are City stands out there who, if they see him starting a match or starting 1 or 2, you'll be able to trade for a pretty decent profit.
Especially if their player is the one missing out.
Exactly. Yep, precisely. So you're cashing in on someone else's desperation. That's classic capitalism.
Yep. Good old fashioned capitalism. And the last one I wanted to mention is Kelechi Iheanacho, and also this also relates back to the extensive research we all do when we are tasked with writing team previews. I've done the Leicester research, and as I knew this before, because I kind of like Leicester as a team and most of their players. Rodgers just cannot figure out if he's going to use a 5-3-2 or a 4-3-3 or some kind of shape shift of these two formations, and there is a very, very real chance, and this is not even before there were rumors in the last 2 days that Newcastle are doing everything to get Harvey Barnes. Even before that, I would put a non-zero chance at Rodgers starting the season in a 2-forward set. And that would include Iheanacho in there, because he is amazing as the player behind Jamie Vardy, or potentially Patson Daka, but Jamie Vardy most likely if he's not injured. So if you can get him and hope for this 5-3-2 to stick, then you'll be the happiest player with your 15th rounder.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Love that. I don't. Inacho's a tough one for me. I can't see myself taking him. I think I'd be much more likely to take like a really high upside punt at that point.
Isn't he a high upside punt?
Is he though? How? I mean,
I think he is. I'll give an anecdote from last season for me.
okay, please.
The end of the season prior, Iheanacho was in incredible form and led to me and many other people drafting him, I think, in the 5th or 6th round last season, which did not pan out very well.
Right.
I even went for the DACA handcuff late, which made it even worse.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of upside, when he's in the team and starting, he has performed very well. So I definitely don't recommend taking him anywhere before round like 12. But I think those last 4 rounds, when you are looking for upside, I think he's a good pick there.
Toddy, were this two-pronged attack to become a reality, your Harvey Barnes love is immediately null and void.
It is. And I would cry in a fetal position. But I would be happy because I would have followed my own advice and picked up Iheanacho in a late round in the draft. He has points per start of 9.8.
That's great.
And points per 90 of 11.2.
All right. Well, something to think about at least. Certainly. All right. Gavin, what do you think as far as your late round flyers, lottery picks, hidden gems, etc.?
I've gone for one that I wrote fairly extensively about in my my Brentford Sleepers article, and that's Brian Mbeumo. I think I mentioned in the article, I was a huge fan of his early on last season. Just watching him, he seemed like one of those guys that should be putting up big numbers based on how involved and dynamic he was in the attack. And he significantly underperformed his XG last season. He hit the post 7 times in 11 matches at the start of last season, and only ended up scoring 4 goals last season when he was expected to score 10. So if even a few of those end up going in, it's already a jump up the rankings for him. But I think the other thing that's interesting is now that Eriksen has left and gone to Manchester United, there's a possibility that Mbeumo might be on some set pieces. He did take some earlier on in the season before Eriksen arrived, and I think he's going to be much more nailed on than somebody like a Matthias Jensen, who would take set pieces when he's in the team. I don't see Jensen really getting in the team that often this season. He's just not that great for the team beyond his set piece quality. And I don't think that's enough for Thomas Frank to keep him in the team regularly, for them to keep pushing forward and try and offset the loss of Eriksen from the team. So I think Mbeumo is one of those guys that, as a forward in the later rounds, when you're looking at guys like the newly promoted forwards of Johnson or Awanai or Jaden Anthony, you're getting a guaranteed starter that has already proven that he can perform in the Premier League, even though he did underperform to an extent last season. I'd much rather have somebody who's nailed on and has underperformed their potential heading into a new season than I would somebody who's either an unproven asset or somebody like a Danny Ings that is going to be super, super goal dependent, and you just don't know what you're going to get. You might get 1 point or 30. I'd rather have maybe that 8 to 15 range of an expectation from somebody like Mbeumo for a forward 4. So I'm pretty high on him this year. I think he's going to do well. even if Brentford do kind of slip back a little bit from where they finished last season, which is what I expect.
Nice.
And then the other guy that I am choosing to highlight is not currently on our top 150 consensus ranks, but I have a sneaky suspicion he might be on our next update this week. And that's Leon Bailey. He's been lights out in preseason, performing extremely well. He's already chimed in with a couple goals and assists. And Gerard actually kind of singled him out for praise after the last preseason match and said, he was really impressed with how Bailey has performed. He seems like a new player, and he is indicating that he really wants to be a part of the first team. And I think it's an indication that Gerard is at least considering having him part of the starting 11. And if Gerard moves away from this 2 up top formation that really doesn't seem to be doing him any favors,
correct,
and goes to a 4-3-3, you could see something like Bailey and Coutinho or Bailey and Buendia flanking Watkins. And I think that's a really tasty kind of formula for attack and potential like really, really high upside late round pick. So Bailey's creeping up my rankings. I think he will be in my top 150 once we release our new updated rankings. I'll be curious to see if anyone else is kind of joining me there.
Well, we moved him up in the newest version 3 of the tiered cheat sheet.
Oh, nice.
So
awesome.
Yeah, he'll be creeping up a little bit at least there.
I'm just glad that we even though Ryan's missing from this edition of the pod, we got a tasty in there from
exactly.
Gavin.
couldn't go without it. Channeling.
Exactly. Yeah. I like it. I mean, I don't know how convinced I am that he's going to start even, I don't know, X number of 20 matches, but like he might be one of those players that's worthwhile to hold, even if he's not starting every match, just for the ones that he does, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And if he doesn't make it into the team the first couple weeks of the season, then you can drop him. I think he's exactly the prototype for that late punt kind of pick that you want to look for towards the end of the draft.
Yeah, good point. All right, anything else on late round guys that we want to add quickly? We good on that? Anything? Do we want to mention
did
Armando Broyo quickly?
Did you not want to speak to Denny's in Dove's potential?
No, I don't know who that is.
First round numbers?
No, I don't know who that is. and anybody drafting with me, I'm gonna actually cut this part out of the podcast. So I will read a very quick section from my Brighton Sleepers article. It starts like this. Let's all be very honest with ourselves for a moment. The Neil Maupay experiment needs to officially come to an end, right? And while sometimes bleedingly obvious things like this that anyone with functioning retinas can pick up on, managers can seem to be slow to make the same realizations. Potter, however, seems to understand that Maupay is just not it. So that's it. That's my argument. Not to mention the fact that he's pretty good. Old Denny's. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't think it's going to be right away. That's the problem.
I just want to be hurt again. I just want the Ali Reza Jahan Baksh experience all over again.
Yeah, exactly. Cengiz Under, Ali Reza Jahan Baksh. I mean, all of them. Yeah, we're gluttons for punishment here. It's fine.
One of them's bound to work out eventually, right?
Yes.
One of them will be the new Riyad Mahrez.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on. So to end it off, we're going to do overvalued, overhyped, or do not draft. These are players that you are staying away from at his current ADP or average draft position. We're not saying don't draft him at all, but we're just saying where he's currently being drafted, yeah, it's not for us. So let's jump into that. Why don't you kick us off here on this one, Gavin, and then we'll kind of end with Toddy. And I have a quick shout out for mine as well.
Sure thing. I alluded to this earlier with the kind of Martial conversation, but I'm out on both potential Manchester United starting strikers. But particularly, I'm going to highlight Cristiano Ronaldo. His ADP right now is 34, which, given kind of all the speculation about will he or won't he stay, even if he does stay, is he going to start? Is he going to, break up this kind of decent rhythm that United has got going with Martial in preseason? Is he going to be petulant and kind of complain and not work for the team? Is he going to fit in Ten Hag's style of play? So there's a lot of questions there that I'm really unsure of. And then if you look at his ADP and who's available afterward, I would much rather have somebody like Bernardo Silva or Felipe Coutinho, even Christian Eriksen from the same team. There's a lot of players that are kind of available in that late third round, early fourth round type of position that I'm going to take over a question mark like Ronaldo, even with his upside. I'm not a huge fan of the 40 points or negative half kind of style of player. So I will go with somebody that I can expect a little bit more consistency from, especially that early in the first 4 rounds.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Toddy?
Yeah, couldn't agree more with your Ronaldo thing. Mine is maybe a bit more controversial, and it's Gabriel Jesus in round 1. And this needs to be caveated that I'm only saying that he, for me, shouldn't go in round 1. He's a very good player, and I think he will fit in well at Arsenal. He will score goals, so I'm not doubting his potential. I just see a lot more value in round 1, and I think that I've been saying this for a while now, and I just think Arteta is not a very good manager. Like he's a decent manager, but I think he's been bailed out many times by some of his players hitting form at the right time. Like I remember I don't think it was this year. Maybe it was this year or last year when they beat Chelsea after Christmas, and before they won against Chelsea, December 28th or something like that, he was, I think, the lowest odds to be sacked. And then he went on this amazing run and pushed for Europe and whatever. But I just don't think he's a very good manager, and there will be everyone's now thinking that Arsenal have become the finished article. And although I really like their transfer window so far, and there's probably more to come. Like if they get in a Yuri Tielemans, I'm much more excited about them. But when the shit hits the fan, I don't think Arteta will be able to manage well. And I think that's where Jesus falls out of the first round into the second round. So not so far down, but into the second round for me.
Okay. Yeah, I know I can see that, and even Ryan, and Ryan follows Arsenal more closely than any of us, and obviously more closely than most humans. Even he said 15 goals was what he thought.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's not a first round forward.
Yeah, even if he has decent ghosts,
right?
That's not a first round forward.
So unless you truly think that it's going to be braces and hat tricks galore, there's first round talent there that you don't want to miss out on. by really reaching for somebody like that. But I don't know. We've got Gavin taking Sterling in the first, so what do we do?
Considering.
Fair enough.
Not committed yet.
I want to run mine past you guys because mine is just a word of caution. This is not a player who's bad or who I'm not drafting at all. I want people to be careful where they're drafting Ivan Toney, because I think there's a lot of hype surrounding the way that he ended the season, and everybody just needs to remember that he ended the season with one Christian Eriksen on his team. And if you sort in Fantrax, and if you play on a different platform, hopefully they allow you to do this sort of thing. Sort by his first half numbers, or at least up until March, when Eriksen really started getting starts. And he was still a great forward. We're talking, I think it was top 15, top 20 for sure. But just be careful. Be careful reaching on Toney, because there are players, again, it's kind of like what we were just discussing with the Jesus Sterling thing. There are players at that point in the draft that you might not want to miss out on by reaching for what you think is a new reality with Toney. But unfortunately, I think that's going to sort of regress back to the norm, which was still great. And I love him as a player. I really do. I love watching him. He's awesome. But just a word of caution. Any thoughts on that, guys?
I'll jump in there because I actually wrote about Toney in my Brentford article.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's true that he did kind of improve in his points per start in the second half of the season, particularly when Eriksen was in the team. But if you do look at the first half numbers, he was actually, I think, sixth highest forward before Eriksen.
Was he? Nice.
Yeah. So, he did improve the points per start, but in terms of like before Eriksen and after Eriksen, I think it was very similar. I think he was sixth best before and maybe eighth best after. Obviously, you have other forwards kind of coming in and around there that may skew those numbers a little bit. Obviously, the form of Kane and Son the second half of the season push him down a little bit. But I still think that I agree with you. I think he is somebody that I've seen going at the turn from round 2 to round 3, and I think that's too early. I think he's maybe a mid round 3 kind of guy at best. I think there's just a little bit of regression, like I mentioned earlier for Brentford. I don't see them finishing like 11th place this season. I think it's going to be closer in those like 14, 15 type of range. And I think he'll still be the focal point of their attack. He's still going to be one of the guys that puts up the ghost points and kind of dominates a lot of statistics. But I do think there probably will be some regression rather than pushing on, especially with Eriksen gone.
Cool.
Okay. So would you? I agree. I cannot add anything more to this, but just a question mark. So I agree with your valuation of Ivan Toney, as in the sort of round 2, round 3 type of guy. But I'll throw a few guys we have talked about today at you to value. So would you rather Ivan Toney or Pedro Neto?
Toney.
Gavin?
That's close. I think Toney just for number of starts.
Okay, and what about Diogo Jota with these two?
It's Toney now with the injury. 3 games missed. Yeah, it's Toney. But honestly, probably prior, I think I would have said Jota, but it's very close.
Yeah, I think before the injury, definitely Jota. Now, probably coin flip. But again, probably leaning Toney, but just barely.
Okay, and last one, Ollie Watkins.
It's difficult
though.
these are all, I mean, I'm happy to get any of these guys is the problem, you know?
But if you had the choice of all of these.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm still on Tony, but again, very, very close. I think in our most recent rankings, I have Tony at 30 and Watkins at 32. So right in the same range. I'd be happy to have either.
I might go Tony too, just because of something that I know about him that not everybody does. The guy gets insane aerials, like a ridiculous number of aerials, and that's points. So I like that.
You like points?
Let me read you because the reason that this resonates with me, Gavin, and I think I read your article, but I was probably doing something else. I'm sorry.
We had enough other stuff going on in other articles to write. I don't blame you. Go back and give it a read, though.
I shall. I wrote about Tony and my 5 players whose draft fantasy EPL prospects have worsened. And that article included guys like Nketiah and Richarlison, who we've already talked about at length. But for Tony, it basically talks about his time with Eriksen and how amazing it was. And then it says, after that, basically, this is fairly concerning considering he played 2 times as many games without Eriksen than with him. Take heed, though, that these numbers still placed him just inside the top 25 overall point scorers during that time frame. So we're looking at, in his 22 games played prior to March 5th, 10.3 points per game, 6 goals, 2 assists, 25 key passes, 20 shots on target, 17 successful dribbles. So definitely a drop-off from what he had with Eriksen. But again, inside the top 25. You'll take that every day of the week.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Just again, being careful not to reach. That's my whole point. All right, cool. And that will wrap it up for this particular episode. Thank you for tuning in to this positional discussion series. We really do appreciate it. I say it all the time. Community, you're the reason we do this. You were the reason why we started the site. You're it. So we love you. Thank you so much for supporting us, for tuning into the podcast, reading the articles, engaging us on Twitter, just all the things. You're the best. So if you have any questions, as we always say, start a dialogue, start a conversation. Add us. We will retweet you if you have questions about how your draft went. You want us to rate your draft. You want the community to rate your draft, because we're not the only ones who know things here. Let's be honest. Go ahead and tag us. We will gladly retweet that. If you want to take part in a mock draft, get at us. We will set you up with somebody who can, probably Chris, let's be honest, it's always Chris who's doing mock drafts. Anyway, we'll set you up with somebody who can help you with mock drafts. If you have trade advice, if you need player valuation assistance, or you just have a player you don't quite understand why we're ranking a certain way or why the community feels a certain way about a certain player, let us know. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's get it out there, because I love to have my mind changed too. There can be sometimes groupthink that goes on in certain aspects of the draft community. So let's make sure we're not, challenging each other in a mean-spirited way, but challenging each other in a way that really just makes it so that we're all fleshing out our opinions to the greatest degree, to where we actually have data, or we actually have valid predictions to back up the things that we're saying. So we're all going into the drafts as best we can. And then those lonely suckers that are not on Twitter joining this community that is so supportive and wonderful, they obviously are going to be the ones who lose out and just get absolutely dominated in their drafts. So anyway, hit us up on Twitter if you have any questions. Otherwise, again, thank you for listening. Head over to thedraftsociety.com. You'll see the draft kit there and everything we've got to offer. Again, thank you for your support, community. Again, we love you.